ladies. Hello, good morning. How are we doing today? When you joined me, I know I'm a few minutes late, so hopefully you have waited or are waiting, and hopefully you know that I'm here in the Goddess group and not on my main page. When you come on, I would really appreciate you saying hello to me, especially this morning. This one is not an easy one. Hi Sam. Welcome Katie. So, as you may have seen, because I posted yesterday and today, the topic that I've come here to share with you this morning is the topic of grief. So I'd just like to start by inviting you to share with me in the comments what brought you here this morning with me for this transmission. Have you just found me by accident this morning? Quote unquote, because there's no accidents. Are you in a process of grief, or have you been in a process of grief recently or at some point? Thank you, Katie. That's really kind of you. Yeah. So I don't know how this is going to go this morning because I am really still deep in the grief of my beloved Pat, who left her body 2.5 weeks ago now. But Great Spirit guided me to come and share with you about her and her life while I'm still in this raw space, right? Because when we share about something once the wound has healed up a lot more, the frequency changes, right? It's not quite so potent because it's not quite so alive. But right now it's very alive in my body. So I would really appreciate you interacting with me as much as you can on this, whether it's like just pressing the heart button or just any words of affirmation that you're here with me would be really, really welcome. So I want to talk about grief, and I want to try to share with you the ways in which I have been learning the potency of grief as a... okay. You're in a process of grieving as well, Katie. Your dear aunt's passing, your grandmother Willow, as well as deep shedding of my former self. Yeah. I think when we lose these powerful matriarchs in our lives, whether it's our mother, our grandmother, spiritual, leaders and guiders, godparents, aunties, uncles, it somehow rattles the foundations for us of our own existence, right? It's not just them that has gone into a transformational portal. We go into a transformational portal of our own in relation to them leaving us here on the earth plane, right? Because it rattles the foundations of our own existence. It throws up so many questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Why are any of us really here? What's the point? Where is she gone? Will I see her again? Is she still here all around me? Can I feel her? Can I feel the same closeness even though she's not in the same form? Do we still have a relationship? What does that relationship look like now? And what do I do with the hole? What do I do with the gaping hole that this person's departure, quote unquote, has left? Because as with everything in life, there is such duality in death. Like, in one way they're not there anymore, and in another way they are absolutely there. Possibly they are there more so. Maybe they are more alive, more present in some way, because their consciousness is no longer bound up to their physical experience, right? Morning, Louise. Oh gosh, I'm gonna start crying every time someone comes on that, like, I feel a heart connection when I'm totally gonna cry. Anyway, this has been such a deep process for me over the last 2.5 weeks. And I want to try to share it with you while it's still so potent for me, because one day you might come back to this class and you might be like, oh my God, this is gold. I need this now. And for some of you, you might need it now, right now. And I don't know. And it's not for me to know. But I just want you to know that this will be available to you forever. Yeah, Katie's saying, is this your auntie, Katie? Or your grandma, that she visits me through signs of a butterfly? Yeah, they will find ways that are most resonant for you. They will find ways to communicate with you that you are most receptive to, and they will let you know that that's how they are connecting. And that love that they had for us here in the physical, that never stops. I want you to know that is eternal. It's the one truth. Love is the one eternal truth, you know? And I think it pains them to see us suffering, you know, and they try to give us these signs to be like, hey, I'm here. And this book that I'm reading called Journey of Souls, which is really fascinating for any of you who are curious, you know, what happens when they cross over through that gate? Like, what's on the other side of that gate? What's the process? Where are they? Like, what are they experiencing? The book is very valuable, and it gives a lot of really precious insights into all of that. And in the first chapter, it says that the writer is, no, it's not Dolores Cannon. It's actually, it's a guy who's a hypnotherapist, and so similar to Dolores Cannon, he puts people into deeply hypnotic states, and he can access the super consciousness there, and he can guide people not just back through past lives, but through the space between the lives where they are on the other side, between reincarnating, like what happens in the spirit world. And in the book, he says that from all of the records that he has acquired over the years of all of the people that he's put back into these hypnotic states in order to get this information, lots of recurring themes come up through the different clients, right? So there are, you know, general consensuses based on the people who've gone through that hypnotic process to recover these memories, that the people on the other side, they often experience quite a sense of frustration with us because they are trying to communicate with us a lot more than we are often receptive to receiving, because we're so deep often in the contraction of the grief. And it's in the pauses between, it's in the spaces between these deep contractions of grief that they can access us, that they can reach us, that they can send us these light healing waves of energy that they want to send to us. So that was something that I found really consoling, you know, just remember to open, remember to still be receptive to their love, which they are still trying to beam down onto us, but just in a different way, right? Because they're not in the human anymore, but like the love connection is alive and well. And that really gives me a lot of, it bolsters me, you know? So what I tried to do this morning before coming on to share with you was to try to put the things that I have found most helpful over the last 2.5 weeks into 10 points for you. And I'm not sure if they will come out in a sort of chronological order, but if they don't, then afterwards I will type them for you. So I believe that grief is a portal. It's a portal for the person who's crossed over, and it's very, very much a portal for us as well. It's not a place to get stuck in, but it's a place to be very fully present with while that portal is open. Does that make sense? Not every time we lose someone within our family even are we deeply affected by the passing of that soul. Sometimes, you know, my uncle passed away last year and I was sad. Of course I was sad, but I didn't go into a deep process of grief. But when Pat passed 2.5 weeks ago, it hit me like an absolute ton of bricks. And we were not blood related, me and Pat. We were soul related. It's a different relationship. It hit me like an absolute ton of bricks. I have only ever experienced deep grief once before, when my grandma died, in terms of someone actually dying. Because we can experience grief all the time. You know, we can experience grief because we've lost contact with somebody, even though they might be alive and well. Maybe a friendship's broken down, or a love relationship's broken down. We can experience deep grief even when we're in a relationship with someone, if the connection feels like it's not there anymore, or the depth of the love isn't what it was. There's a grief even when we're still in relationships sometimes. So grief takes many forms. Good morning, Beatrice. But Pat leaving her body was like, apart from my grandma who passed when I was 17, who I was also extremely close to, this is the one that's hit me like a fucking sledgehammer. Hello, darling. Welcome, Beatrice. It's hit me like a sledgehammer. I've had no choice but to go deep into the grief, into the pain, into the feeling, into the inquiry. A friend of mine shares, grief is when you feel you have love that no longer has a place to go. Yeah, and I feel like that's also part, it's a lovely description, and I also feel it's part of the illusion as well, that it has nowhere to go, because it has everywhere to go if we channel it right. Do you know what I mean? Like, it no longer gets to be expressed in the physical body to the other person, but it has 1,001 new ways to be expressed, which them leaving their body can inspire in us, right? Can awaken in us, that if they'd stayed in their body would not have been awoken. That's why I'm saying it's such a deeply transformational process for those of us who are in the grief. So the first thing that I want to share with you that's so important is to go fully into the grief portal when it strikes you. It may only strike you a handful of times in your lifetime that it hits you this hard. And when it does, it's a gift, believe it or not. It's a gift in so many ways. It's bringing us back to the heart. We numb out the heart a lot to get through this life. We numb out our deeper feelings. We numb out loss. We numb out sorrow. We numb out regret. We numb out pain all the time in a million ways. And then every now and again, something happens that hits us so powerfully that it's no longer an option to numb out. The only option is to feel. And that person leaving is what precipitates many years of stored, unexpressed pain, grief, and sorrow to be released from the body. As they are released from their body, so all that we are holding, which is not serving, is also precipitated to be released. There is a symbiotic process of release happening. And many times we, especially in families, if we're feeling deep grief, we try to hide it from the other family members. Let me know if that's something you've experienced. We don't want to set each other off, quote unquote. We don't want to upset anyone. And so we repress it. We cry silently in the toilet. We pretend in front of the children that we're fine. Pretend in front of our partner that we're fine. In front of our colleagues that we're fine. We're not fucking fine at all, but we pretend that we are, and we just cry silently, alone at night. And that's not how we're meant to grieve, I don't think. I think we're meant to grieve very fucking loudly and in a very embodied way. We're not meant to just cry silently in between getting on with life and pretending everything's fine. We often have a tendency as humans to try to move through things much faster than is the natural way of things. And that's how we get stuck. We're not meant to stay stuck in grief. We're meant to go fully in. Morning, Paula. Welcome. Going fully in for me over the last, well, particularly the first 12 days after Pat left, was crying on and off all fucking day. Every day. The tears were never more than a few minutes away from coming back. I'd have a little break, and then they'd come back. And then someone would come and visit me. And then I'd have a nap. And then I'd start again. And I fully trusted that I was meant to be doing that. Hello, Paula, my darling. So nice to have you. Yeah. Let's see what Louise is saying. I lost my beloved dog a couple of days before my last birthday in October, which has become the week of people returning home over the years. It was mine and the kids' sledgehammer, very unique grief. I could recognise so many moments Spirit were at work preparing us beforehand. Beautiful when I think about it, and the signs I've received since are incredibly profound. I was very conscious of allowing the kids to see me grieve. Amazing, Louise. Well done. Well done. Process, break down when I needed, and they learned, and we learned to hold a special space for each other. That is so beautiful, Louise. That is so beautiful. It's so important to let the children see that we don't block off our own emotions and that we hold them as sacred, and we allow the children, because when you allow the children to see you in that process, you are giving them many gifts. You know, one of the gifts is you're letting them know it's okay to feel pain and express it. It's safe. Number two, you're saying it's safe to do it and be witnessed. There is such a power, such a profound power in being witnessed in our grief. When we are witnessed in our truth, or in our grief, or in our pain, or in our sexuality, like whatever it is that's part of our core truth, when we are witnessed by another in that depth of truth, something transformational happens for all people involved in that process. So it allows the children to see that it's safe to be fully expressive in pain, that it's safe to be held by others when we're in that pain. And it also shows them that you trust them. That you trust them, that they can occasionally hold space for you too. And when that happens, and it's, you know, not all the time, but it's occasionally, we allow the children to hold space for us, it's powerful for them too. They are, just because they're mini humans, it doesn't mean that they're not evolved, you know. They're very evolved. In many ways, they're more evolved than we are. So I attempted to go to work 2 days after Pat had transitioned. And literally, as soon as the first person said to me, "How are you? How was your summer holiday?" You know, the tears just came absolutely streaming down my face. Like I couldn't couldn't hide it. Couldn't hide it because I was so deep in it. I tried to hide. I went into a classroom, pretended that I was looking for something on the shelf and literally hid inside the shelf. And I was just sobbing. I was crouching on the floor and sobbing. And my manager, Mark, who is actually a really lovely human when he's not obsessing over exam results, somebody told him that I was not okay. And he came in and he said, "Hey, you, come here. What are you doing hiding on the floor?" He goes, "Come here." And he literally picked me up off the floor and he held me to his chest and he just said, "None of this matters," meaning work. "None of this matters." And he said, "Go home and just look after yourself and just do what you need to do. All of this shit here can wait till next week." And he pulled me away from his chest so he could look at me. And he looked into my eyes and he saw my eyes and he said, no. He said, "This is not the right place for you today. You need to go home." And even when I'm in the depths of pain, he has this amazing ability to make me laugh. And he said, go and put your woo-woo music on. And he said, "Make yourself a herbal tea, green tea with mango, specifically with mango. That always helps." And he said, "And just put your head under the pillow and just cry and just do what you need to do. And then text me later." And then he said, "Actually, don't fucking text me. Phone me. Phone me later." You see, when we allow people to see our raw truth, and there's nothing more raw than grief, we tap into the humanity of the other person. Because we all go around, none of this matters, exactly, Katie. We all go around pretending like superficial shit really matters. And most of it really doesn't. And it's when you are in your raw fucking pain and truth, you will be met by other people transitioning through the layers of bullshit that they've been programmed to believe are important, and meeting you right there in that place of heart. And over I went back into it. I had a full week off, and he texted me that night and he said, "Just so you know, I'm not expecting to see you in work tomorrow or Wednesday, because I work a 3-day week there." So pretty much he was saying, just take the week off. And how many of us have got that inner pleaser that's like, "Oh God, I can't do that. He's already been generous giving me a day off. I need to just sort myself out and drag my ass back in there tomorrow morning and pretend that I give a shit." But I'm wiser now. And my wisdom is stronger than my pleaser, if that makes sense. So the wise part of me knew full well that the universe was giving me a week to go deep in. Via Mark. The universe works through humans. And he was saying, go home and grieve. Be in it. Be fully in it. Take your time. It's like a birthing process, deep grief. It's waves. It comes in waves of agony. It's a deeply spiritual experience, actually, deep grief. To be so present with yourself. To be so present with the pain. Thank you, Katie. I can really feel that you're here with me and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. To be so present with our pain. Listening, breathing, hands on our heart, hands on our body, hands on our belly. So fucking present with ourselves. Such a powerful alchemical process to go through. So a big part of honouring grief is honouring your body's time frame for that grief. Not trying to hurry your body along. Not trying to hide it from other people. When I went back into work on Tuesday this week, I was still raw, but nowhere near as raw as I was the week before, so I was able to at least function. But I was still tender, and people could see that, and people were asking me about that. And at least 3 women that I work with ended up sharing deep stories of loss of their own, you know. One lady was sharing with me about losing her mother. It had been the anniversary of her mother's death the previous day, and she was telling me how tough that day is for her every year and the process that she goes through every year on that anniversary. And another beautiful woman that I work with was telling me that she also had a guardian angel, because Pat was very much my guardian angel. And this friend at work was telling me that she had one, and he was also a similar age to Pat. And he'd done some profoundly beautiful things for this friend of mine when she was younger, to help her pay for tuition fees and give her accommodation in London for free when she was studying for an MA as an immigrant in the UK. You know, this guy just showered her with like unconditional love in the way that Pat showered me with unconditional love. And to see her face light up as she was sharing the memories with me of that guy was beautiful. So beautiful. The connection that I have with those women at work has deepened exponentially over the last week, because being in such a raw place means that the heart is de-armored. And when the heart is de-armored, other people feel safe to de-armor in our presence. And that is a gift. That is a gift, that our souls are craving for that deeper connection with each other. But the world is organized in such a way that it's rare. And that's why I describe grief as a portal. It's a door that opens between your heart and other people's heart when they see you like that, and they can find their way in. They can rush in. Love can rush in. Because the universe is self-correcting and self-actualizing. Every time there is a loss or a perceived loss, the cosmic scales will balance that out for you by bringing you love in a different form via different people. So many people have reached out to me in the last couple of weeks. It's unbelievable. And I know that that's Pat nudging them, sending them. Because when people transition over to the other side, they can use their energy to manipulate circumstances around us for the highest good. They have the power to do that. I've had people saying to me, "You keep coming into my thoughts all the time. I'm not sure why, so I'm contacting you." That's Pat. That's Pat putting me in those people's thoughts so that they reach out to me. And your loved ones will be able to do similar things for you from the other side. They will send people to you that they know you experience catharsis with. People who they know can soothe you. They will send them. So the love hasn't gone anywhere. It's just coming at us in a different form. Yeah, it's beautiful. And something that I've been doing since Pat transitioned is going through my Facebook timeline and her Facebook timeline since 2016, when we first became Facebook friends. We've been friends in real life since I was 8. I met Pat when I was 8. She was in her probably early 40s then. So our friendship has spanned 35 years, in the physical. And Pat was 100% my guardian angel on this planet, there is no doubt. And thank God for Facebook, because at least in that regard, there is a trail of all of the comments, all of the messages, all of the exchanges that Pat and I have shared over the last, 6 years or so online. And I have gone through, and believe me, it's been a laborious, not laborious, but it's been a painstaking process, because Pat loved Facebook. So she posted a lot. Sometimes she'd post 7 or 8 times a day. So it's been a slow process to go through her timelines, and mine, because I post a lot too. And I want to show you what I've been making, because this has been such a beautiful process. Can you see the jar? So this is called the Pat Love Jar. The Pat Love Jar. And every message that I have found from Pat of love, an expression of love in one form or another, I have transcribed those messages onto those pieces of paper, and I have folded the pieces of paper and put them inside the love jar. And the love jar is so full of messages now. And it's such a beautiful, healing and eternal reference point for me to come back to anytime and every time I need to connect with Pat's love for me, which was unconditional. So this is the part that's going to be harder for me to talk about, because it's so tender for me. But Pat was an angel. And I'm very lucky, I have a lot of angels in my life. But Pat was like next level, matriarchal, angel of the highest order. And I knew Pat through the church. I met Pat through the church because we're Catholic. And I remember when I was 8 years old and we first started going to that church. And I was always really bored when the priest was doing the sermon. It was really fucking dull. I was always looking around. There was a family called the Yates family, and there were 4 sisters. There was Cassie, and there was Abby, and there was Charlie, and there was Lucy Yates. And all of those sisters were incredibly beautiful. They all had incredibly long, shiny hair, and their mother was an interior designer, so they always looked really stylish, and they just used to stand there in the choir part, just looking like goddesses. So when the priest was talking and I was bored, I just used to look at the Yates sisters and think, wow, they're so beautiful. Like, I used to stare at them. They probably thought I was really, really weird. But anyway, sometimes they'd smile at me. But when we started to sing, and we used to sing really uplifting songs in that church, like ones that would really set your heart and your soul on fire, kind of uplifting, charismatic songs of praise. So as soon as the priest basically shut up and it was time to sing, I was like that kid, like that opening scene from What's Love Got to Do with It, where Tina Turner, I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's a very iconic scene at the beginning of the film where the little child version of Tina Turner is, singing full power in the church at the choir rehearsal, but she's singing her own melodies, and the choir mistress keeps shouting at her to sing along with everyone else. You're relating to the Catholic story, Katie, yeah? So as soon as the hymn started, I would start giving it full power. I came alive to the Lord when the music started. And I remember when I was 8 and we'd first started going there, at the end of the mass, Pat was in the bench in front. She always used to sit second row in, at the far end of the pew on the left side of the church. So she was in front to my right. And she turned around to look at me and she goes, "Oh, was that your beautiful voice that I could hear behind me? And I was like, you know, delighted that someone had noticed my voice. I was like, yeah. And she said, wow, what a beautiful, beautiful voice that you've got. Precious, precious gift. And I remember the feeling of being so seen by this woman, you know, so noticed. And that my gift was so valued by her. And Pat had this way of reaching everybody. You know, to me, she was the embodiment of the gospel. She was the embodiment of the gospel. She didn't try to understand that stuff at an intellectual level, although she did. She understood that the teachings of the gospel were all about love. And Pat retained almost a very childlike innocence in the way that she expressed love. Her heart was just completely open, wide open. She didn't appear to have any of the normal protection mechanisms that the rest of us have, you know? Normal people do not fling their arms open to everybody at the end of the church, you know? But Pat did. And every Sunday at the end of the Mass, there would be a huddle of people around Pat, waiting to interact with her in some way, waiting to speak to her, to be hugged by her, to receive her light. She was and is pure light. Pure light. There was no filter on that woman's heart. She never ever held back from hugging people and expressing that unconditional love for people she didn't even fucking know. She'd just feel it and express it. And the priest would be stood there at the door by himself at the end, waiting for people to greet him. No fucker was there because they were all around Pat. Pure light being. And her hugs were like the most extraordinary hugs. You could feel the love from her heart pulsating through her entire body, transmitting that frequency into your body. She was a healer of the highest order. And I knew that. And she knew that I knew that. So we knew each other on a very profound level. And at the end of the Mass, I would always look for Pat. And sometimes I was on the opposite side of the church. And even when she was surrounded by people, she was always looking for me at the end of the Mass. She would scan that church until she found my eyes. And then she'd put her hand on her heart. And she'd say to me, she'd mouth at me across the church, I love you. I love you so much. And she'd fling her arms open to me. As if to say, like, get over here. And I would be drawn to her like a moth to the flame. And it was an interesting dynamic because my mum was always there. And my mum was very threatened by my connection with Pat. She didn't understand it. She didn't like it. You know, it brought up a lot of jealousy, a lot of insecurity, I think, for my mum. It was on a frequency that my mum didn't understand. It was pure heart-to-heart connection. There was no filter. Through Pat, and I would say through Pat alone, I have experienced what it feels like to give and receive unconditional love. It never stopped. It never ever stopped. And during the pandemic, Pat and I didn't see it the same way, you know? A lot of people had differences of opinion, didn't they? And during that time, it was a very polarizing time. Either you were in the fear or you weren't in the fear. And then that then dictated very different choices and very different belief systems, right? And sometimes I was quite vocal during that time. For those of you who knew me during that time, you know, I expressed quite clearly on Facebook what my position was on that. And Pat expressed hers, and it was different. And that was the first time that I was like self-conscious about what I was posting and how Pat might have received it, because her husband was very ill. So she had to be really careful. But I knew it was my calling to shed light on what I felt was going on during that time. So I had to be courageous in that and take a risk on how that would land for other people that I love. But it was particularly hard with her. I worried, I felt ashamed. Sometimes I felt guilty for posting the things that I posted, even though I knew it was part of my deeper dharma to do that. Sometimes I worried maybe she didn't love me as much. Maybe she didn't like me as much. And then every now and again, she'd pop up with a comment, and I knew that any doubt that I had that she would have retracted that love was in my head. It wasn't real. In February, I shared a post about self-love on Valentine's Day with a photograph of myself looking at myself in the mirror. And Pat was very drawn to posts where I showed pictures of myself. You know, I think she felt me strongly when she saw images of me. And she commented and she said, "Such a gorgeous photo. I love you." And I said, "I love you so much," in capital letters. And she said, "So do I." And she said, "Isn't it incredible to be able to hold this much love for another person in your heart? Isn't it a beautiful feeling?" And it's been so powerful to go through those posts one by one, you know, scrolling and scrolling. It's taken me hours to find those gems to add to the love jar. But it's been worth every second. Every time I found one of those, I've been like, oh my God. Her love for me didn't waver. It didn't waver through differences of opinion or anything as superficial as that. And I think we can all learn something from that, can't we? I know that I let certain differences of opinion during that time cause me to separate myself from certain people that I'd previously been really close to. But it was like Pat knew that underneath all of the noise and the chatter of the world and opinions and politics and all the rest of it, underneath that there's a greater truth that is just love. And that was the Christ-like embodiment of love that she was able to embody. I don't know how she did it. Her heart was like brimming with love for everybody. She saw everybody as God's children, no matter how old. She's known me from when I was 8 to when I'm 43, and she still used to call me my precious child. And to her, we were all children, you know, just doing our best, making mistakes, always worthy of that unconditional love. And during the last few years of her life, you know, her husband was quite poorly, so sometimes she'd have to leave church early so that the person who was going to deliver the Eucharistic ministry to him at home, she could let them in. And I remember about 3-4 years ago, I only went to church to see Pat in the end. Like, I just used to go 2-3 times a year to see Pat and to have a hug from Pat. And there was one December, I think it was 2018, where I'd specifically gone to see Pat, and she'd had to leave early, so I didn't get to have that famous hug with her that could just fix everything, you know, that was wrong. Just the love that you would get from one of Pat's hugs would just bolster you for like weeks, you know. So I messaged her on Facebook and I said I was so sorry that I didn't get to hug you at the end of church. And she said, I know, I had to go and let Pauline in because she'd come to give Hugh the ministry. But she said, but I could feel the waves of love from you coming towards me the whole time we were in church. I could feel them. And that was what was so beautiful about our relationship. It was just pure love. Every message we've ever sent each other is just telling each other how much we love each other. Like, that was it. And one of the things that I've been really sitting with, and maybe this is helpful for you too, is when someone that we love that deeply passes, like, what was their ultimate message to us? And what was their ultimate message to the world? Because every one of us that's born here comes with a unique gift. And in some people like Pat, it's very, very easy because their gifts are so palpable. There was no, you know, obvious shadow with Pat. Although no doubt she had one, because we all do. With other people that pass, the grief process can be more complex, right? Because if somebody passes that you've had a complex relationship with on earth, then there will be a complex set of processes to go through in grief. Things unsaid, things unexpressed, things unhealed. But thankfully with Pat, with my relationship with Pat, there is nothing but a trail of love. Nothing but love. Everywhere you look, every message, every exchange. Her message to me, exactly, Catherine, I want to be like Pat, exactly. I feel like all of the people that I've even spoken to about Pat since she passed have received some kind of healing through her. She's with us on this transmission, by the way. She's absolutely with us. Pat's message to humankind, not through preaching, but through simply how she lived, was open your arms to everyone. Don't exclude anyone from the frequency of love. Forgive everyone. Don't be a doormat. Pat was a fucking powerhouse. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't mess with her. It's not about being a doormat. She was the warrior. She was a warrior of the heart. And her whole mission was to alleviate suffering in people in whatever way she could. To lift people up in whatever way she could. That was her whole raison d'être. And in the past couple of weeks, as I've been feeling so deeply into what is Pat's imprint, how do I honor her legacy? It's how do I open my heart wider? That would be the greatest way that I can honor her life. When someone that you love deeply passes, you take the essence of them, the essence of what their gift was to the world, and you look at how you can continue the legacy. And then that quote that was shared earlier about grief is just an expression of love that has nowhere to go becomes obsolete because it's got everywhere to go. Every time I reach out to somebody through the heart, I am carrying out Pat's work on this earth plane. I'm honouring her. I'm honouring her life. I'm honouring her beauty. Her heart was just radiantly loving, radiantly loving. Anyone who came into contact with her was transformed. In much the same way I imagine people who came into contact with Jesus were transformed. That unconditional love frequency is so rare in humans, but she had it. And the fact that she had such a soft spot for me when she was so deeply loved by thousands of people was an extraordinary gift. Pat was deeply spiritual. She read the Bible a lot, and she used to quote it at me in ways that I didn't always fully understand. But something that she said to me repeatedly, and it was only after her passing that I actually looked into it and researched it, was she used to say to me, when I see you, it's like when Elizabeth saw Mary in the visitation. And then she'd see that I wasn't quite fully down with what that story was, so she'd explain a little bit, and she'd say, oh, when Mary's cousin Elizabeth was pregnant, and Mary travelled for many days to go and be with Elizabeth during the latter stages of her pregnancy. And when Elizabeth it was when Elizabeth heard Mary's voice and upon entering the house that she felt the Holy Spirit leaping with joy inside of her body at the sound of Mary entering the house. And Pat used to say to me, that's how I feel when I see you. That's the joy that I feel in my body when I see you. How many of us allow ourselves to feel that depth of love for other humans, let alone express it? We don't, do we? We don't. We're too afraid. Thank you, Jess. We're too afraid of rejection. We're too afraid of being misunderstood. We're too afraid of not being wanted or trying to work out whether people deserve it. Pat didn't waste any fucking time or resources worrying whether anyone deserved it. In her mind, you're a child of God. You deserve it. We're all suffering here in one way or another. There is a lot of suffering here. But when we hold each other in that frequency of love, there is so much healing for the giver and the receiver. And Pat knew that to the core of her being. And that's how she lived. Unafraid. She just made herself a channel for love. And people were magnetized to her like moths to the flame. She was the safest person I know as far as like trusting her with my heart, you know? And 2 weeks before she left her body, she messaged me to let me know that she'd been diagnosed with liver cancer. But I had no idea that it was going to happen so fast, that she was going to leave, right? I thought maybe we were talking quite a few months, maybe even up to a year. But she knew. She must have known that she was close to the end, even though she didn't let on to me. But she did let me know that she'd been diagnosed. Oh, we didn't meet by chance as a child. No, she came in to protect me. She came in to give me that love that she knew that I wasn't getting at home. She knew that. 100% it wasn't an accident. Anyway, when she told me that she'd been diagnosed, the first thing I said to her was, Pat, will you let me come to you? Will you let me give you hands-on healing? Because Pat used to often give people hands-on healing in the church. Because the love that powered through that woman's hands, you know, was fucking phenomenal. Like, you could feel it bouncing off your body. And I wanted to give her the same. And she said, when I said, will you let me come to you? Will you let me give you hands-on healing? She said, just pray for me, my precious child. That's all I need from you right now. And I knew that that was her way of saying no. And that was tough. That was really tough, because I felt such a compulsion to go to her. And at the same time, I respected her choice. Not everybody wants people to see them when they're in those final stages. You know, Pauline, her best friend, said to me, you wouldn't have recognised her if you'd seen her in the last couple of weeks. And I think she wanted me to remember her as the bright light that she has always been in my life. She wanted me to remember her with that life force energy that was so strong. I know that. So she said to me, look, whenever you need me, just place your hand on your heart, because I know I'm in there. And I will always, always be guiding you and protecting you and loving you. And I will send a whole army of angels to surround you and protect you. I will never leave you, I promise. And I know she'll never leave me. I know she's with me every minute of every day. I was so precious to her, and she let me know every time she saw me and every time she interacted with me how precious I was to her. And I did the same for her. I always let her know. Some people are easier to love than others, right? Some people are hard to love because they've closed off from it so much. But Pat could fucking get in. Pat could get into any nook and cranny of the hardest heart and sandblast it open with laser beams of love. Like, I am so lucky, Beatrice, to have had Pat for so many years watching over me. I am so lucky. She used to say to me, I pray for you every day. Yeah, that's true, Beatrice. Not everybody has that chance. She said to me once, she said, do you know, every morning I picture you and me sitting either side of a bench and I picture Jesus in the middle, and I just hold us there in the light. And I do that every morning. And I remember when she told me that, thinking, but that's crazy. Like, why me? Why does she do that for me? There are thousands of people that love Pat, and Pat loves thousands of people. But like she tried to say to me that time when she told me about the visitation, something in our souls leaped in each other's presence. That was reciprocal. And a few nights ago, I sat with my good friend Nikki Cuff in her garden, and we had a glass of wine to raise a toast to Pat. And we took the love jar and we took Pat's photo, and we took turns to take the love notes out of the jar and to read them aloud to each other. And Nikki said to me at least 3 times, I want you to know that you were just as much of a blessing in her life as she was in yours. I really want you to get that part, because I'm not sure that you're fully getting that part. And as I've gone back through all of the messages on Facebook that she and I shared over the last 6 years, it's really clear from the trail of messages from me to her, as well as from her to me, that I was fully expressive of that love towards her in all of my messages as well. And that's it. Nothing else remains. You know, I've gone through days in the last 2.5 weeks of beating myself up, like, why didn't I reply to her very last message where she told me which ones of her nieces were looking after her? Why didn't I respond to that? Why didn't I make a point of going to her house even though she didn't say to come? This is a part of grief, right? Is that we start raking over it. Why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? I should have done this. I shouldn't have said that. And my colleague Linda said to me last week, did she know that you loved her? Did she know that you loved her? And I said, beyond a shadow of a doubt, she knew that I loved her. And Linda said, so then none of the rest of it matters. Nothing else matters. That's the only thing that remains. Pure. Timeless. Eternal. So having a ritual like that, for me, was so powerful. To read the love notes between myself and Pat, it was like a love relationship, but it existed in a spiritual plane, if that makes sense. It wasn't a romantic love relationship, but it was definitely a love relationship, which stayed in a very pure frequency. And maybe Pat and I were not meant to see each other more in the human world. Maybe we were not meant to hang out and have cups of tea and do things together. Because that's something that I've questioned a lot over the last couple of weeks, is why didn't we do things together? Why didn't we spend time together when we had such a profound love for each other? Why didn't we? The fact of the matter is, I believe, having reflected on it very deeply, that she and I were meant to hold each other in that frequency of unconditional love while we were on the planet at the same time. To lift each other's spirits, to raise each other up, to remind each other of the angelic frequency that we came from. That was our sole purpose for each other. To beam each other with unconditional love, to remind each other of the angelic frequency. And if we'd had more human contact, then that pure love frequency most likely would have been somewhat tainted, because that is the nature of humans, right? We upset each other, we misunderstand each other, we break friends with each other. You know, this is what humans do. So everything happens exactly as it's meant to. We were meant to be there for each other energetically more so than physically. We hugged each other every time we saw each other with a deep, deep love, and we shared deeply loving words with one another. But we were not meant to be deeply embroiled in each other's day-to-day life. Exactly, Jess. Loving space, that was what we were meant to hold for each other. Uncontaminated, pure loving space. So each person that manifests in your life, they're there for a very specific, unique reason. And a really important part of the grieving process is to see, to honour, and to recognise what their unique contribution was to you and to your life, and what their unique contribution was to the world, or where they held many wounds and blocked places. How can you move through those blocked places in your life to honour where they got stuck? Right? It's 11:11 now, by the way. Because wherever we can honour the person who's passed, we alchemize the grief. We alchemize the grief back into love. And at the end of the day, everything is meant to alchemize back into love. So thank you. Thank you so much for those of you who've been here with me this morning. Jessica, Beatrice, Katie, Sam, Natalie. For those of you who might be watching this later, I really hope there's something in here that's inspiring to you or touches you or helps you to alchemize grief in your own heart in whatever way. Such a beautiful... Louise, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this sacred space with me this morning. I appreciate it more than you know. Thank you for allowing me to share with you the significance of Pat's life. May it ripple out into the world. And may she always be guiding us, because I know she will be. Aho. Have a wonderful Sunday. I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.